Hey everybody, welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yee.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
In an earlier video, or a separate video, we reviewed the new edition of Through the Desert from Allplay, who's one of our sponsors, and we mentioned that there is this, which is the 4 new modular expansion, basically. What we're going to do here is we're going to show you how each of the 4 different modules works, and then we'll give you our thoughts on them. So let's go ahead and cut to the overhead. The 4 modules for Through the Desert are shown here on this single sheet here. All of the rules are explained in pretty good detail, well enough, so let me walk you through what the 4 of these are. First is the Rival Nomads, which you're simply going to shuffle these up and place 2 of them out onto the side of the board somewhere, visible for all players, and they are endgame objectives that will award 10 points for the player who has the highest number of enclosed areas, or has the most caravans adjacent to Oasis markers. If there's a tie, then each player instead just takes a 5-point token. If only a single player has done it, they're awarded 10 points. There are several of these, so you can see if you're playing on the river side of the board, most camels adjacent to the river. Most camels in your smallest caravan, having the largest caravan, most claimed Oasis markers, most watering hole tokens, most camels within 2 spaces of the middle mountain range, if you're playing on the desert mountain range map. Most enclosed spaces containing empty watering holes, and most camels adjacent to the outside edge of the board. So that's the whole first thing right there, endgame scoring. Next up, let's talk about the djinns. These are cards, a deck of cards that you'll have set up on the side here, and every time a player places a new camel adjacent to one of the Oasis markers, you will flip over the top djinn card of the deck, which is going to create a requirement. So from now on, it says that on a player's turn, watering holes cannot be placed on. So no one can claim one of these watering hole tokens until the next time that a player connects to another Oasis, and when that happens, you will then flip over the next djinn card, replacing this current effect with the new one. Purple camels cannot be placed. That might slow things down for players, so they'll spend time connecting to another Oasis marker, and you must place at least 1 green camel. So you can see that these just have little restrictions and requirements of what players must do on their turn. Once one of these has been flipped over, there will always be exactly 1 active djinn special card in play. Let's jump over to the next module here, the special watering hole tiles. You will replace a certain amount of 1s, 2s, and 3s of these victory point tiles, and you'll instead replace them with these. There are 2 types. The first of which are the spices here. They will just be in a location, and you can collect the spices. A single spice by itself is worth 0 points, but each pair of them will be worth 10, so you'll definitely be incentivized to try to make sure to get even pairs of those. The other tokens are these camel tokens. You claim these just as the same as you would with any other one of these tiles. When you place onto that relevant watering hole, you'll take the tile from there, and then you can hold this tile in front of you until a later turn. You can spend this to place a 3rd camel on your turn. You can only do that once per turn, so at most 3 camels. And if you are playing with the djinns module, that next camel, the extra one you spend for that token, can ignore any other requirements that are shown on these on the cards here. The last module is going to be the bazaars. You are trying to connect bazaars with villages, which are shown on the outside of the board. So on these bazaar spaces, the stars shown on the different 3 areas of the map, you'll place a 15, 10, and a 5 token, the 15 on top. And the first player to connect all the way from the outside edge here, these village spaces, to adjacent to one of these bazaars, will take the top token available. 15 points for the first player to do so, 10 points for the next player to do so, and then 5 for the last. Then it just becomes a normal space that you can go to. So you're going to place out these 3 stacks here and race to try and get those done. And those are all 4 modules. So as you can see, each of these 4 things changes up one little aspect of the game. It doesn't add too much, and it's supposed to fit into this box just fine, which is a little lift there, but I also find that actually was there even without the extra things. It's just cards and some tokens, so the lid lift is about the same. Mike, why don't we go through each of these 4 modules, we'll kind of speak to them briefly, and then we'll talk about the package as a whole. So why don't you start us off talking about the watering hole tiles, the more stuff, the extra tiles in there.
Yeah, so this expansion is basically just what it says. It's more stuff. It definitely adds a bit of variability to the game because you're replacing some standard water holes with these new watering holes. There's kind of 2 major special tokens. You've got the spice tokens, which are essentially you're trying to get pairs. So if you get a pair of the spice tokens, you get 10 points, but a single spice token doesn't score you at all. So that's one potential thing to go for. And then the tiles that I've seen get kind of rushed for in the games I've played more than others are the camel tiles, which allow you to place another camel out. That seems very powerful, and it certainly can be, but it's a little more situational than I think it first presents itself to be. I mean, it's always great to stick out another camel. You're going for longer caravan routes and things along those lines, but I think oftentimes you're better off going for the sure things, and those extra camels can be very good, especially in the later portions of the game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you're essentially giving up a camel now to get a watering hole token that doesn't do anything immediately. To be able to place another one, you're kind of like passing on one turn now to get a third later, and yet there's still something so enticing that people do chase those. I think, but I'll admit that I do that myself. But I also like chasing the spices because 10 points is a lot, enough to the point where you say, I'll get one for sure because I'm sure I'll get a second. But they're kind of drying up. Should I go for a third one because I might not get a fourth? So I think that they're valued pretty well because I see people chasing all of these tiles. Seems like a good, solid add-in, mix-in for me.
Agreed. Yeah, it's something that's so easy to implement that in most cases I'm going to be playing, actually probably in all cases now, unless I'm teaching the game to somebody for the first time where I'll just do the base game. This is not much above that.
And I think it's to the point where I could, for my own copy, I would just leave them mixed in because I don't want to have to sort them in and out. And I'm like, hey, sorry, I'm probably teaching you this version of it. The next module here is called the Gins. And this is the one where I kind of feel the opposite of that. These are special cards. When you reach the oasis, you flip over, hey, there's a new restriction. And so doing the things like, you must place out at least 1 yellow camel this turn, or you can't put out any purples. This is such a wild expansion. It feels like the most disparate from the base game one that there is. I think it's going to be pretty obvious and pretty apparent to you if you look at that and say, oh, that doesn't sound like what I want to throw into my games of Through the Desert.
Yeah, I agree. This is the one that definitely changes up the feel of the game drastically, whereas the others that we'll be talking about and have talked about are more kind of incremental little changes. This one, I think, is going to be what I'm calling a Marmite expansion. If you get that reference, it means that people are generally either going to love it or they're going to hate it, and there probably won't be a lot of in between. I think that there are a lot of people that have played Through the Desert for years that know what type of experience they're going to be getting out of it, which is a low luck, abstract game that has a very particular feel to it. You're interacting with the other players, you're kind of doing these different path building and area control, and it has a very particular feel to it. You put the Gins in there and it gets a little bit chaotic and a little wacky at times. And I think that there will be some people that love that felt like, well, Through the Desert was fine, but it was too abstract for me, too dry. They may really love this. And then there might be other people that want that kind of abstract feel that the game gave you, and this might be too much for them.
Yeah, I would say that this, as an expansion module, is about as subtle as a sledgehammer. Whereas the special water tiles, like those fit just in, these ones don't. But at least it's something very different. So let's go over to the bazaars next. Mike, why don't you tell us, start off your thoughts on like the connecting the villages to the bazaars.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I do like this one a lot. Because it gives you another, shared incentive that you're kind of going for. And I guess that may not be the most accurate term, shared. I mean, you are potentially sharing points. The idea is that you're going to have tiles on the outer edge of the board, or yes, and you're going to be building paths to one of these tokens in the center of the board. And the first player there is going to get the highest point value. They go in decreasing point value down as more players come later. And so it's interesting in the sense that you've already got some things that are out there that you're kind of like racing for. You're racing for especially the water tokens, the watering hole tokens, because that's first one that gets it, and that's it. There's somewhat of a race for the oasis or oases, although multiple caravans can connect to that. But this is something that is going to be, it's going to be tugging at you. You already, again, have those different things you're looking for. And here's another thing that you're going for. If you get there first, it's a significant number of points, and that swing can be very, very impactful if you are kind of left alone to go for those and everyone else is kind of racing for the other things.
This one feels a little bit more like, hey, this feels different. It's not just more of kind of what already came in the base game, but I do think it is a smooth addition. But as you said, it's another thing to aim for. So if you know that you kind of struggle with what we call AP, analysis paralysis, kind of locking up because there's a lot of golden eggs you're chasing for, the Bazaars is like one extra one that kind of can make you say, oh, I don't know which direction to go with. I think it's good, but I could see some players feeling like maybe it's too much, even though it's quite simple. At least, especially though, for earlier plays. I would kind of leave that one out, I think, of my earlier plays, whereas I could throw in the special watering hole tiles just fine. And then the last one here. Oh, yeah, please go for it, Mike.
No, I was just going to reiterate. I think that that's a very good point to bring up, is that I don't think that this would be one that I would introduce to new players, just because it's one more level of thought process and it could lock some people up.
Yeah. Now, the last one here, I really love the title, The Rival Nomads. Ooh, they're endgame objective cards. There's really no two ways about that. And so you shuffle the deck, you set out two of them. And then, hey, at the end of the game, whoever, crossed the river the most times on the river map, or whoever has the most pieces on the outside edge gets 10 points. I like that there's a very clean split if there's multiple. There's already 5-point tokens in the game. So with just a little deck of cards, it changes up the gameplay, and it's very easy to implement. Your thoughts on the Rival Nomads, Michael?
I agree that it's funny that they did some thematic name. I'm trying to figure out how endgame scoring is a rival, but regardless, I don't find these necessary. I think that they're fine if you really like having endgame goals. I can see how it might be helpful to give some people some things to focus on. I can tell you that in the dozens of games of Through the Desert that I've played over the years, I never thought, ooh, what this needs is a more interesting endgame. This needs endgame objectives. I've never felt that, because the endgame of the base game of Through the Desert is pretty tense on its own. That being said, they're not a negative. To me, it's a take it or leave it expansion, honestly.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of like my favorite part of Havilandi. I didn't really love that Knizia hot air balloon game where there's two endgame scoring cards. I really liked it in that game because it needed it, in my opinion. And this one in Through the Desert, I don't think it needs it, but like you said, there's no problem with having it, and I kind of like it just so that if someone's really not sure what to do, they're like, I'll put an extra camel on the outside edge. Maybe that'll net me 10 points. As a whole, these are 4, I think, pretty small expansion modules for the most part. None of them feel huge, and I don't think that Through the Desert is a game that needs really a huge expansion. So do you feel like this is something that's kind of worth it getting when you're talking about this as all 4 of these modules together, Mike?
The short answer is yes, and I'll probably try to keep it to a relatively short answer. something that if you are new to the game, I don't know that you should start necessarily with anything other than maybe the bonus tiles, maybe the end game cards. I think the other ones change the experience enough that you may want to at least play a couple of games of the base game to get a feel of the general strategies, the kind of the pacing of the game, things along those lines, because some of these things can draw your focus away from, some of the big end goals, particularly some of the area control, things along those lines. So for people who have played it, over the last couple of decades, there are some really interesting, neat little wrinkles in here. So overall, yes, I think this is something that is a nice addition to Through the Desert.
Yeah, as me being a new player, I've only played Through the Desert for the first time in the last year. I also recognize that I'm not the kind of person who tends to play the same game 50 times. And Through the Desert clearly is a game that holds up to the scrutiny of so many repeated plays. So I know for myself, having a little extra and a little extra sauce or a little extra season you throw in does kind of incentivize me to play the same game I already have a little bit more. So I could see that part of it being good for new players. But I think that you are also going to be just well served with the base game. And then if you feel like, I do want that little bit of extra seasoning on there, this is a pretty good expansion pack. And even if you don't end up loving one of the four of them, I think that you'll probably like two, really like at least two of them. Maybe, enjoy a third one, throw it in every once in a while. And maybe the gins are going to be that Marmite experience, right? Very extreme one end or the other. But as a whole, Mike, what would you rate this package here?
So I'm going to be giving it as an overall package of modular expansions an 8. The reason behind that is something you just mentioned, is that I think in the future when I play Through the Desert that I'm going to be adding at least 2 of these expansions every time, likely 3. And I think that's a pretty good hit rate for it. Again, let me just put it out there. The more stuff is my favorite of these, then the Bazaar, then the Rival Nomads, and then the Djinns. But I do think that there are going to be particular players that maybe wouldn't have been interested in Through the Desert otherwise, that might now be, because the Djinns can create a more kind of random chaotic experience. And if I know players tend to like those experiences, I might now introduce this to them where I might not have in the past. So an 8, a recommendation for sure for these expansions.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I would rate those 4 modules the exact same order of preference as you. Just the more stuff, the more watering holes, and then kind of going down from there. And yeah, so an 8 for this package as well for me. I don't think it's essential. I feel like the base game stands on its own so well. But I also know myself, and I really like these, and I'll probably throw the special water tiles in and never want to sort them out. So they'll live in my copy, I guess. So yeah, there you go. We're both recommending the Bazaar expansion for Through the Ages. I think Allplay did a good job. Allplay being a sponsor of the channel, so keep that in mind, of course. But, Mike being a raging Knizia-phile, a lover of Knizia games, can speak to, obviously, years of experience and saying, hey, these are good. I think that you would enjoy adding them in, as do I. So a high of an 8 gives a seal of approval.
Just a quick, you said Through the Ages.
Oh my gosh, I've done that before.
The Desert, yes. Through the Ages, that's another game, of course, but Through the Desert.
Through the Desert, folks. Anyway, before I embarrass myself some more, thanks for coming by the Dice Hour. My name is Chris Yee.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
And I'm going to continue to embarrass myself.
Nicely done. I'm going to cut it way before this.